executive director of Calflora, which is a phenomenal tracking system for California plants. And she has taken this whole effort to a whole nother level. And we've had her speak before, but tonight, hopefully she'll have some news for us and some new information. So welcome, Cynthia. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And thank you all for being here for our presentation.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. And I hope it is new information. I think the last time I talked to Milo Baker was 3 years ago. And if you have questions as I'm going through these slides, please do, start my video. Hi. Please do type your questions into the chat, especially if they're kind of game changer questions that you need answered before I move on to the next subject. And this beautiful photo is by Michelle Carl. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about is photo contributions that your chapter has contributed to Calflora. My video keeps going off. Is it okay if my video is off, or should I turn it on every time? Keeps turning on.
It's all right.
Okay, I'll turn it on for now. All right, so this is new Calflora tools for CNPS users, and some of the tools themselves you will have used before, but there's new features on them which you might not know about yet. Here is the Calflora team, and I want to point out my email address. Please contact me with any questions, cpowell@calflora.org. And I have my degree in GIS, which is Geographic Information Science. I'm a database oriented person, and I'm learning a lot about botany, and I'm excited to go hiking with your chapter on Sunday at Bodega Dunes. And I inevitably learn new species every time I go hiking with chapters. And so here's our team. I sent out a survey asking people so I think knowing your audience is really important, and knowing what you guys want to learn about Calflora specifically is important. So I sent out a survey. If you haven't filled it out yet, it's a link in the chat, and it's just 4 questions, and you can fill it out now. And based on that feedback, I generated this outline for tonight. If there's something else that you were hoping to learn about, or something that you think should be added to this outline, you could type that in the chat too. That would be helpful. And I will incorporate it into this presentation. So Calflora basics, how you can learn from each other while using Calflora. Map layers, we have a lot of new map layers. The planting guide, which is a relatively new feature in Calflora. What grows here, which I'm sure you've used before, most of you, has some new features in it. Also iNaturalist, we have a new data feed coming from iNaturalist. Your questions, and then at the very end, I'm going to talk about, Erica has done a great job entering a lot of Milo Baker's chapter surveys into Calflora. There's a handful left, and maybe Erica wants to do them all, or maybe she's tired. I don't know. We can talk to her about that when we get to that section. What is Calflora? It's a 501c3 nonprofit plant database, and we provide information on wild California plants for conservation, education, and appreciation. And we serve a lot of information coming from a lot of different sources. So for instance, of the 10,000 native and introduced species that exist in the wild in the state, I should update that. It's now over 3 million plant location observations come from a variety of different places. They're not all just Calflora observations. They come from iNaturalist, they come from EDD maps, they come from state parks, county parks, national forests, all over the state. And then we aggregate them and serve them out of Calflora. So when you're using what grows here and all of these Calflora applications, keep that in mind. It's not just what people have said and what chapters have said grows in a certain area. It's pulling in observations from other sources. When the plant names change, we do crosswalk old names and new names. And I want to point out that on the line tonight is a chapter member who is also an employee of Calflora. His name's John Malpaz. And just today, he finished another Jepson eFlora update between old and new plant names And that's going to go in our news section of the website. So you can read all about the new names that you maybe didn't even know changed, or you knew they changed, but you were kind of hoping they wouldn't, because now you're never going to remember them. But
That's
whatever. Hi, John. Thanks for being here tonight. And then we have over 300,000 plant photos. Some of those are from your photos, like that Michelle's photo on my cover slide is from one of her observations. And 80,000 unique e-visitors each month. That's gone up during the COVID. And then about 4,000 active data contributors. And I know a few of you on the line tonight are active data contributors. I know your chapter in Erica is an active data contributor. And the more information that's accurate from your chapter that we have in the database, the more rich and useful the site is to everybody. The Calflora database contains all 10,000 native and introduced species. That's all wild plant species in the state. And I mentioned the other sources, including CCH, which is specimen, California Consortium of Herbaria, and some filtered iNaturalist data. We only take research grade, and then we have other filters on our iNaturalist data feed as well. And if it's really good, John's on the line, especially if you have questions about those data feeds, because he is in charge of them. As important as it is what we are, it's also important to know what we're not, because a lot of people think with the Cal at the beginning of our name that we must be part of the UC system, but we're not. We're not part of Cal Photos, although they generously share their photos with us to serve on our website. They are part of UC. We're not. We're not part of the California Invasive Plant Council. They're a separate nonprofit. And obviously, since you guys are part of CNPS, you know that Calflora is a separate nonprofit from CNPS, and we've been a 501c3 since 2000. So last year we celebrated our 20th birthday.
Wow, great.
Yeah, right. Wow. Everybody wants to know, well, as a nonprofit, where does the funding come from? And I want to point out that CNPS chapters, including yours, support Calflora, and individual donations are about 1/3 of our funding. Fee for service work is 1/3 of our funding. And then Weed Manager, which I'm not going to talk a lot about tonight, is tracking and mapping invasive plant treatment, creating reports, et cetera, for agencies and organizations who are in the field looking at invasive plants. There's a question in the chat, what does wild mean? John, do you want to answer how do we define wild? Or you can say no.
Well, just going through, here's kind of an analogy, just going through the new plants added to the Jetsam e-flora. They don't have a non-native category. They have a naturalized category and a WAIF category. That's WAIF. For our purposes, those are both non-native. And wild means that they're capable of, growing, propagating themselves without human help. But then, WAIF is a really interesting concept because, like, there's a great Thomas Howell flora of Marin, and he includes 1 or 2 plants that, probably just escaped from a garden and grew in the edge of a road for 1 or 2 seasons, and they're not there anymore, and they really are not natives to Marin. So it takes vigilance. There are some things that really are kind of marginally wild.
So it's
is
a
that a good enough
nuanced.
answer?
Yeah. Well, it's good enough for me. DJ, you were the one who asked the question. Is that good enough for you? I guess, do we unmute DJ, or does DJ do that?
That's a good question.
I unmuted myself.
Oh, good.
And I was just curious because, I mean, the usual question is what's native versus non-native. But when you said you had all wild plants in California, I just immediately thought, well, what is that?
What is that? Right. How do you define it?
Yeah.
And it's nuanced.
Good. That was
Okay.
good.
Okay. Our most popular pages are these, what we call taxon report pages. And so there's one taxon report page for each wild plant species in California, and then each subspecies and variety has its own page too. So that's over 10,000 taxon report pages, and each one, I mean, I guess there's some way to do an informal survey. If we were live right now in person, I would say, raise of hands, who's seen a taxon report page before for any species in Calflora? I'm going to go over the, there's something good. You guys are so savvy. You got Carrie and Betty Young, got your hands up right away. They are the pages that include, I'm going to go over what you can find out about any plant based on the taxon report, whether it's native or not. And in this case, it's not native, this arundo. So there's a link to the Calypsy rating about it and information about it. And also, also if it is not native, you'll see little red squares on the map, and those are quads for invasives. The yellow squares are quads for rare plants where we don't share the exact location. And the red squares are quads somewhere in that quadrangle, which is about 6 miles by 6 miles in California, is arundo, exactly where you could probably go find it. And then we have alternate names. So for the California aster, there's 3 alternate names, and maybe as of today with John's work, maybe I don't know, this might not be on the list, but there might be another one. And whatever name you're searching for, whatever generation you grew up in, and whatever name you learned, you can find it in Calflora. Type the name that you learned, and we crosswalk as the verb them all together so that you find the species you're looking for.
One other thing, JEF means Gypsum eflora.
Thank you. Good point. Wetlands at the bottom of this page, equally likely to occur in wetlands and not, and also the plant communities. So for each species, if it's relevant, there's wetlands and communities listed. Nursery availability from CNPLX, that stands for California Native Plant Link Exchange, whether the plant is available commercially and if it is, where. For instance, Annie's Annual, Central Coast Wilds, you can look for here we go, Sonoma, your county, and find out where you can buy seeds or starts of the species that you're interested in planting. And I'm going to talk more about that when I get to the Calflora planting guide. So now that was Calflora basics, learning from each other using Calflora. There's really no end to this number 2 subject. So I'm just going to barely touch on it. And who's mapping and tracking which species? Eldorado, Milo Baker. Where and how? For instance, Sarah Gordon, who's Milo Baker, she is at least sometimes looking at creeping St. John's wort and logging it in the Calflora database and adding her gorgeous, gorgeous photos. And I like the hand. I don't always like a hand in a photo, but I think for scale, it can be really useful in at least a few photos or one. So this was chosen as a reference photo for this taxon report page. And I just took a few important key features out of the taxon report page and put them into the slide. So you can see the scientific name, the common name, the map with the distribution on it. Those blue dots show where it grows in the state, and then a couple photos, including someone from your chapter. And when you see that, you can say, oh, Sarah, I want to learn more about this. You know, contact her. I know her. Peter Warner, he might. I'm not sure. I know he's really active in your chapter area in terms of botanizing. I'm not sure if he's actually in your chapter or if he's in a different one. But this Calypso, gorgeous photo by Peter, and then one of those blue dots, at least one of those blue dots is his, associated with the photo. For every photo that you add to the Calflora database, there does need to be a location because we are a spatially oriented database. And that location, like for instance, if you said this fairy slipper grows in San Diego County, well, that would be an extreme outlier. Oh, Peter is in your chapter, great. And he might even be on the line tonight, I hope he is. So if you said that this fairy slipper was in San Diego County, that would be an extreme outlier and would be flagged. But if you said it's maybe in San Luis Obispo, which isn't so far outside of its territory, that would go into the algorithms and kind of throw things off. So there are people like you, and hopefully more of you will do this, commenting on records and giving your feedback and letting people know, quality control, quality checking. There's millions of observations in this database, and with a staff of 6 or 7 people, we can't, and also not all of us botanists, we're not always looking at every single observation that comes in. So if you see something like Peter is very active in Plant ID Help Group. So people say, I know the genus and I'm not sure about the species. What do you think? And if Peter, if it's in Sonoma County or an area that he knows, he'll chime in and say, here's what I think it is based on your photos and your location. And that's really, really helpful. Here is a photo by Michelle, also in your chapter. It's an invasive plant. And I know we might boo and hiss, but learning about invasive plants is really important to be able to control them. And so her great photo here and her observation, that blue dot somewhere on that map, is helping people learn about where the species grows in the state. Oh, another one by Michelle. Oh, I love that photo. Slender-leaved ice plant. And you do see there are sometimes little outliers here, and when we go live on Calflora, we can click on this county and see whose observation is this. Are they knowledgeable? My guess is that is a specimen from a long time ago.
Or it might be in somebody's garden.
Oh yeah, that happens sometimes too. So back to the definition of wild, every now and again, we get cultivated plants in the database that throw things off a little bit. Okay, now let's talk about map layers. We have some new map layers. Serpentine, for instance, is new, and those purple, blue, and red polygons show where serpentine is in the state, and they represent different eras in terms of when the serpentine came to be. I don't know the exact dates, but if you look under our information about layers, you can figure that out. Watersheds, we also have sub watersheds and maybe even sub watersheds, so that if you're looking at something that may be an invasive plant that washes downstream, searching at the watershed layer is always a good idea to know what's upstream from you. Precipitation, important layers for figuring out what will grow well where. We have protected areas, and since there's so many protected areas in California, which is great, they kind of blend together here in this state screenshot showing all protected areas in the entire state. Every single pastel polygon is a protected area according to the California Protected Area Database. So we don't make this up. We import it from another database and then we serve it to you. Like same with serpentine, same with precipitation. They all come from somewhere else and are useful for learning about plants. CNPS chapters. So if you want to search for what's rare in your chapter or who's been observing recently in your chapter, you can go to, I'm pretty sure your chapter is just a county, but some chapters are multiple counties and pieces of counties, and it's a little bit more complicated. So that's a useful layer to have. And now a lot of people in your survey were really wanting to learn about the planting guide. So I'm going to launch into that. And the planting guide, there's a link to it from our homepage. Let me just go to calflora.org. So here's our new homepage with this beautiful changing photos. And one of these photos could be yours. We pulled them from observations in the Calflora database, and you of course would get credit here with your name. So planting guide is here. So to start, click on the map to choose a location. Well, let's go to where you all are. And you can also type in an address if you prefer here. So let's look somewhere just outside Sebastopol. I'm just going to click there. And you guys tell me either in the chat or unmute yourselves. The list of species that it's going to generate here should this be an area that's watered or is it low water?
I would guess low water.
Low water. Okay, so then it's not riparian and shady. And we're just making this
It
up.
could
'Cause-
be. It could be.
Okay, so I'll zoom in a little bit more. So
Oh,
let's
you're at
see.
Regal. Yeah, there's some oak.
There's some.
There are a lot of oaks there.
All right, so let's search, given those criteria, and then once we get our list, it might be too long or it might be too short, and we can change our criteria based on what we know about this place and what it is that we were hoping to plant there. 148 plants supposedly grow well or will grow well here, native, of course. Fold up the map. This indicates a pollinator here. We'll just scroll through the bloom wheel and then 3 reference photos about the species. If you click on the scientific name, you can go to the taxon report, which we were looking at static before. You can look at the plant range. This is by Watershed, and then this is by climate model. And this is all new thanks to John's work. Oh, it's interesting. There's not much going on for climate model for this one, but for Watershed, there's quite a lot for this Columbine. You can go to CNPLX to see where it may be commercially available near you. Let's see, Sonoma. Wow, it's available in a lot of places. North Coast Native Nursery, Petaluma. And then you can also say, if you say, now Columbine, based on this location, I'm not so sure. Why is that showing up in my results? Let's see. Location suitability. The plant tolerances tell you about the Columbine. The Columbine needs to exist or grows best between 0 and 3,270 meters. It needs between 17 and 159 inches of rain or precipitation. This is the wet season, the temperature range where it thrives, and the location values indicate that for this place just west of Sebastopol, Regal Ranch Park, it is at 30, Regal Ranch, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Regal Ranch Park is at 39 meters elevation. Precipitation there on average is 41 inches. The wet season is generally 8 months. Temperature range, it's generally around 46 degrees Fahrenheit there, etc. Soil, pH, max salinity, depth, texture, calcium carbonate, etc. So that's why the species showed up on my list. Now, if I wanted to have tighter constraints, let's see what more criteria. We can say, okay, 148, that's way too many. I want ones that are only easy to establish within 10 miles, also in the same county, also in the same ecoregion, use soil factors to choose plants and omit plants at the edge of their tolerances. So now we'll get less than 148. I'm guessing 90. Let's see how our results change based on our change criteria. Is this making sense? Do you guys have questions about how these criteria work? 91, that was a good guess. Okay, everybody's muted, not writing in the chat. So I'm gonna just keep moving here and assuming everybody's with me. These are ones that were also on our previous list, but also grow within 10 miles of our point on the map, are in the same county, grow within the same county, grow also within the same ecoregion, etc. You can use, this is new, plants that grow with. If you already have a community established here and you want to plant some other things, you can type in the scientific name. What's something, what's a community that you know is already growing here that you might want to plant?
Or suppose you have a live oak, let's say, Quercus
Okay.
agrifolia, and you want to grow some stuff around it.
So there's this type ahead. So you don't even have to know how to spell Quercus agrifolia. You can just select it. So what grows well, given all my constraints up here, and also grows well with this live oak. Is that what you're saying, John?
Yeah.
How many think they're going to be? 20, 10,
Not sure.
31. Wow, 31. All right. So of our list of 91 now, we're down to 31 that do particularly well with this coast live oak. Do you want to add anything to that, John?
No, and that's based on them, growing relatively near each other. So all of these plants have been observed growing near live oaks.
Just a footnote, we have most of those plants at the plant sale.
Good.
That's great. If you want to share this list with someone who's actually doing working on restoration at this Rego Ranch Park, you can send it as an email, you can download the spreadsheet, and you can also look at what grows here in this ecoregion. And you can always on Calflora take the URL and copy and paste it yourself into an email. If you have a question for us, that's a great thing to do so we can see exactly what you're seeing.
So Cindy, Cynthia, how did you get to that help screen there? I didn't see how you did that.
Tools, good question.
Okay.
Tools, and then you can go to help.
Okay.
John, I'm guessing John wrote almost everything that's on the help, and then I put together the video, and then maybe one of our other developers did one small other thing, but John's mostly responsible for this planting guide. And then the map, if it gets in the way, you can fold that up with the little blue arrow also. And scroll through your results, and then it takes a little time for the names and everything to load, but clicking on the scientific name is how you get to CNPLX, location suitability, and then the taxon report for that species. With the gorgeous photos. Used to be 4 static photos, and now you can scroll through them. Okay, so that is the planting guide. Let me go back to my, this slideshow. So that's the planting guide. Any questions about how that works?
This might have been from before your planting guide, but you clicked on the climate model. Did that have to do with a planting guide, or was that before?
Great question. Who asked that?
This
is Wendy? Wendy,
Yeah.
okay. For every species in Calflora, they all 10,000 of them, or 10,000 plus of them, have this so-called taxon report page. And from this taxon report page, and also sometimes from, well, anyway, we'll just say from the taxon report page, you can look at the plant range by watershed. And we can talk a little bit more about how this map is generated. These yellow and orange polygons represent where this yarrow should grow, and then by climate model, which John, it's good you're on the phone because that does not look right to me. And then you can add individual observations to see where it grows, where the observations are.
So what is it by climate model? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Try going in really tight.
Okay.
And turn off individual. For some reason, it's coming out very pale yellow now. But
Okay. Okay, before I turn off individual observations, I just want to talk about the fact that purple, here's our little legend. Purple means simple point. Blue square means obscured point. Pink, I don't see any pink here. Here's some pink in the Bay Area. Pink means a polygon. So someone saw a large area of this yarrow and noted it. A blue dot is specimen, so coming from CCH. And then a green square is coming from a survey or checklist. And
yeah,
you can,
one more thing, you can see the little gray halo around some of those points, and that just means they're not precise. This is our director Roy West asked for that after he walked into a bunch of poison oak trying to find a rare something or other, didn't find it, and then got really mad about it.
So it's implying that if you want to look for it right here, take that with a grain of salt. It's somewhere in this area, but not necessarily right there. All right, so now I have my climate model turned on, and the climate model is saying that the yarrow is going to grow well where it's yellow. I'll turn these off so you can see the yellow better. And then Wendy asked, what is this climate model? What does that come from? And under tools, under help, you can read about our climate model algorithm. It's utilizes two systems, a grid and also the EPA level. For each ecoregion that contains the plant, it collects the values of elevation, precipitation, summer high temperature, winter low, et cetera, to produce a set of ecoregion specific tolerances. Then it considers every 30 arc minute cell in that ecoregion. When the values of a cell are within ecoregion specific tolerances, the cell is included in the potential habitat. And that's why they're all squares. All these little climate model, suitable by climate model, those are all squares, or technically they're probably rectangles. And then when you go to watershed, they are watershed shaped polygons for the suitability area. Does that answer your question, Wendy, or is there more that you'd like to know?
So am I right that that information is something you would use if you were doing a study and you wanted to know whether there was a chance of that plant growing, even though you don't see it actually on the map? Or what is the
What's the point?
Right.
For different species, so yarrow, if you found what you thought were pretty sure was yarrow, say east of Stockton, and this, yarrow, we pretty much all know what this looks like, even the non-botanists here like me, but you might question your ID, and the Calflora algorithm might actually flag it as saying, unlikely that it could actually grow there, would actually grow there, also based on all those other plant tolerances that we went over in the planting guide. And how exactly people use it, Wendy, by watershed or by climate model, I think there's a lot of different uses for researchers, for ecologists, for botanists, for biologists. And there was a demand for this, an ask for this, and John wanted to build it, and so he built it. And how exactly it's used all the time, we have Google statistics, but we don't really know how it's always being used. But generally speaking, it can help you figure out where something should grow well and where it shouldn't grow. If you think you found something, a species outside of its suitable habitat or potential habitat, then you might want to reconsider and talk to Peter Werner
Okay,
or Betty Young.
Okay, so basically this is not some kind of a guess about, given, say temperatures go up 10 degrees, then this plant will grow there. It has nothing to do with climate change. In other words, it's more current conditions.
John?
That's right. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, we could have looked at warmer, wetter, warmer, drier futures and generated maps that would be really depressing for rare plants, and the invasive plants would be spreading, whether it's warmer, wetter, or warmer, drier. But yeah, correct. This is just for right now.
Got
Good
it.
questions.
Okay.
Okay, so that was a lot of information about every single all of these 10,000 species is available from the Taxon report page. Plant range, plant characteristics, which we looked at to see what the tolerances are. CNPS, where is it available in the nursery? And observation search shows who made these observations, who are they, what do they know, what year was it, how high is the location accuracy. We have the bloom period, more photos from Calflora, more photos from Calphotos, family, genus, subspecies and variety, etc. So any more questions about that. That was a lot, I realize. One question is, can you search by specific watershed? Yes. Great question. Who asked that? Wendy asked that. Wendy is full of good questions. Let's go to, for this manzanita, observation search. And to search by a specific watershed, our watersheds are located on every map under layers. And they're the last one under region. So I assume you guys might be interested in a watershed near you. And when you click on it, these pastels, it'll show up the name down here. So Pool Creek. Pocket Canyon. All right, so if you want, well, there aren't any observations in Pocket Canyon. Okay,
What you
here's a
could do,
watershed.
pick
Yeah.
a small one and
Uh-huh.
then ask for every native plant in the
Okay.
watershed. That might.
All right, so here's Pocket Canyon, which seems pretty small. This is the size of it. And instead of looking at this Arctostaphylos, we'll get rid of that and say in the selected area, which native plants grow there, including specimens, Consortium of California Herbaria, and including iNaturalist. 103 observations of native plants. And here they are. You can fold up the map. You can click on the map if you want to learn more about each individual observation, or you can fold up the map and sort by plant name. Now this Hall's bent grass there's 2 observations of it in this watershed. And if you wanted to just have a list of all the species that grow in this watershed, you could go to tools and what grows here at this location. And this just has a list of the species that grow in the watershed. Okay, turn watershed on. And then we're in Pocket Canyon, in map area, native plants, and search. So 86 plants and 103 records. So there's some of the same species seen more than once. Can also sort by date. Ooh, 1888. That was a long time ago. Those are mostly specimens from a long time ago. And to get more detail, you can click on the purple pencil and go to detail and check it out and see what you think about that observation. So that's searching by watershed in several different ways. That's searching by watershed. What are all the observations in this watershed of native plants? And searching by watershed, what are the species, the 86 species that grow in the Pocket Canyon watershed? And again, you could export this, print it, send it to a friend, copy and paste the URL in an email to us and ask more questions about it. And any layer that we have, you can search in that exact way. So protected areas, click on it. This is Bohemia.
There might not be very
Ecological.
much in that one.
Ecological preserve. We could say, is there anything at all in Bohemia Ecological Preserve? Wow, there's a lot. You thought there wasn't going to be anything, huh? Wow.
Huh.
And you can ungroup by life form.
You know, there's somebody who's done checklists at Bohemia Grove.
Oh, in this, maybe it's
Probably.
even Milo Baker, this chapter. Is this one of your checklists, you guys?
This probably is. It's actually not the Bohemian Grove. This is the
Oh,
this is the preserve that was a land trust. It was Sonoma Land Trust
Okay.
preserve. It's now land paths. It's now a land paths preserve.
okay.
Erica says she might have added that. And Erica, thank you for what you did add to Calflora from current slide. Okay, so Calflora's planting guide, how does it work? You put in a location, it gives you a list of the native plants that grow well there. Here are all the factors that the planting guide considers when spitting out those 91 results. We did the screen share. And now I was going to move on to what grows here, which I actually just showed you live. Does anybody have questions about what grows here? Erica says it was fun to add those plant lists. That's great. All right, iNaturalist. Let's go live for that one. If you have an iNaturalist handle, if you could type it into the chat, then we could look up what you have in here that we might have access to. iNaturalist is a huge, Michelle has one. And anybody else, even though Michelle typed in hers, feel free to type in yours if there's anybody else who has an iNat handle. So you can add observations to Calflora from iNaturalist. We do get a data pull from iNaturalist, but for everything that wasn't pulled in already into the database, here's Michelle's. Search. Then you can add it to Calflora if it's not there already. John designed the iNaturalist data pull with a big filter. So some things, including a density filter. So some things are already there and some aren't. Of Michelle's observations in Calflora in iNaturalist that are plants in the state of California, 552 are not yet in Calflora. Here's where they are on the map. Here's where they are as a list. We can fold up the map. Oh, that's pretty. So if there's something, a species that you're researching or something that you think should be in the system that's not, you can click on it and say add to Calflora, and then it'll go in. Let's look up Wendy's. AWAM. And Carrie, I'll do yours too. And Al. So of Wendy's observations in iNaturalist, 14 are not yet in Calflora. And here they are. Is that one? And then Carrie Winger. Or sorry, I pronounced it wrong. Wininger. And if it doesn't come up with any, it usually means that your Creative Commons license in iNaturalist doesn't allow Calflora to have your observations, in which case you can change them. Oh, I'm just going to guess and say the reason that this one didn't come in is because we have plenty already in Calflora. It's probably the density filter caught the yellow star thistle, but we could add it anyway. And there they are. And then we'll do one last one from Al, A.L. Nubs. Does anybody have any questions about iNaturalist data feed in Calflora? This is also new, thanks to John.
Yeah, so I did have one question. Does do you have to have what do they call it? Professional? Does it have to be
Research grade? Yes, it does have to be
research grade?
research grade. Yep.
Okay.
And anything that's showing up in this list, like for Al Nubs, the 75 records are research grade, or else they wouldn't show up in this list, or else there wouldn't be an option to add them to Calflora because we don't want them if they're not research grade. Okay, so that's iNaturalist, one of the many data feeds. iNaturalist Live. Now we get to Erica. Entering chapter surveys into Calflora. Here are those green squares, our neon squares are where we already have chapter checklists or plant lists. Thank you, Erica. These plant lists are already in Calflora at the top in smaller font. And missing at least are the following. So there might be reasons like, for instance, Vine Hill, you guys might not want in Calflora because it's you have to have permission to go there. But if Erica said it was fun when she added these. So if Erica or anybody else wants to add them, if you as a chapter decide they're a good idea, they would be really great to have. And it's a when you add a list of plants saying these all grow in this one area, then whenever anybody's using what grows here or the planting guide, that informs the results they get from those queries. And without your chapter checklists, the information available from Calflora would be less complete.
Hey, Cynthia, I do see there just maybe an error here. I see on the list Trione and Adele State Park, and it's
Oh, yeah.
there as missing. So
Yeah, that was my mistake.
I was gonna put a shout out that this is Erica. Hi.
Thanks, Erica. Yoo-hoo.
Like I said, it's kind of a enjoyable, slightly mindless activity. If anybody has lists, I'd be happy to have a look at them and see about putting them in. So
Oh, that's a great idea.
you can figure out who I am and send them to me.
Yeah. Do you want to put your email in the chat, or maybe you have another way you would prefer to share your information with people? I was basing it on, oh, go ahead, Erica.
Through I think my email is on the board member list.
Okay. So here's where I was looking at all the plant lists on your website, but Erica is suggesting, which is a great idea, that some of you might have actually, a lot of you probably do have plant lists that are not listed here on your Milo Baker website, and that could also enhance the Calflora database. And she's volunteering, offering to help you get that information into a place where it will be available to the wider public, which is great.
I'll just add one more other quick thing, was that, as you said, there were a few that we didn't make public. There are a few that I actually did put on, but we didn't end up clicking the button for make public because we weren't sure if it was something that people were comfortable, having be public. I think the Nefertira and maybe the Vine Hill one might have been in that category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, for us, in terms of all the algorithms on Calflora, if it's private property, I would suggest noting, let's just look at your surveys that you have right now. So about Calflora surveys, and let's just look up Milo anywhere in the state. Search, see, here's your 18, these green squares. And we can pull up the map. So look at Armstrong here. All right, so somewhere within this pink polygon, which is Armstrong Redwoods, these 248 species exist. And you're not saying exactly where, you're just saying somewhere in Armstrong Redwoods, these exist. So if that is not shareable, like if that's information that you don't want people to know, if there's maybe a rare plant or you're afraid they might poach it or something like that, I would suggest adding the rare plant separately and just including the natives that aren't rare and then the non-natives on this list, if that's the concern. And for the Nefertira,
Yeah,
Liz, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay, and Liz Parsons asked, saying it burned last year, so it's out of date. But that is great to know because we need baseline data to know how things are changing due to climate change, due to fire, due to development. And without your list from last year saying this is from 2020, when we go back in 2021 after it burned, we won't know how things have changed. So that's arguably even more important than what's there, than what's there right this second. This one, for instance, for Armstrong is from 2002. Now you might have been there since 2002 and seen even more species. Or maybe you went there last year and you didn't see the chamise. And you say, I don't think it really, maybe it grew there in 2002. It doesn't grow there anymore. That is really important to note. You can say, I'm not going to go a lot into this, but you can create history stacks showing change over time. And the point Erica had, or the question Erica had about rare plants and how you could add those separately from the survey and obscure them. So if you go to add a record and it's, any rare plant here, instead of saying published, you're going to say obscured, and that moves it into the center of the quarter quad. And people know it's somewhere in there, but they don't know exactly where. And that way it'll be protected. Nefertiti is a private property. Do we or you have to have permission from the owners to post a list? John, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, the only possible answer we could give publicly would be yes, you do. The problems with that, there's always a possibility that if you found a rare plant on somebody's property that well, either, I don't know, somebody would poach it, let's say. That's the most biggest danger of that. The other problems that we've seen, though, have to do with weeds on agricultural land. And there the impact is economic. So in other words, the landowner doesn't want it publicly known that these certain weeds are on their ranch, because when they go to sell it, that it would affect the price.
Yeah, so the short answer is it's your decision. And obscuring is a great way to share information with the public without being too specific about it.
So John, wouldn't that also apply to rare plants? If a piece of property has a rare plant on it and it's documented, doesn't that affect theoretically their ability to sell it?
Yeah, it does. That's a whole thing. I wish David Magny was here and I could just defer to him because he understands that better than I do, and some of the bad things that have happened along that line. But let's say theoretically, you own 10 acres and somebody wants to buy it and they want to put up a mall, and you've documented a rare plant. Well, that's going to get that's going to be trouble for them when they go to develop the mall. So, yes.
Okay.
And that's the end of the slide stack and the live Calflora demonstrations I wanted to show you. And now questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
On occasion, when I'm futzing around on iNaturalist and I'm trying to identify something, I frequently use what grows here and other tools in Calflora, along with the Jepson e-manual, to help me figure out what likely identifications might be for a plant. And I've noticed that on rare occasion, there's inconsistent taxonomy across those different platforms. When I encounter that, One, is there an easy explanation for why those inconsistencies arise? And two, is there any reason that I should document those inconsistencies, or is there someone I should report those to?
I am so glad John's on the call. I'm going to defer to
Well,
you.
I mean, you can certainly write us. You can write us, and we'll give you a specific answer about it.
And we welcome emails. Here's how to
Yeah,
write to
definitely.
us. Contact
Especially about
Calflora.
stuff like that. But
Not if you're complaining. No, just
no,
kidding.
yeah. If all you have to say is it didn't work, then,
No, we
I
still
don't
want
want
to
to
know.
know. No, but so we have a kind of the main places we look for nomenclature, like what is an active name and what is an old name synonym, are the Gypsum flora, the CNPS inventory with CNDDB, the California plant list, and then USDA plants. So we're most likely, if CNPS inventory, or I'll call it CNDDB, if CNDDB doesn't disagree with Gypsum flora, then no problem. We'll just use the Gypsum flora name. There's a lot of cases, like at least 100, I think, where CNDDB has held on to an old name, let's say with a variety in it, and the Gypsum flora has gone on and said there are no varieties anymore. In that case, we will keep both. And that can be confusing. So, if you look at it strictly Gypsum flora point of view, the varieties don't exist. So, but if you're looking at it from a CNPS inventory point of view, they do exist and they're different from whatever the Gypsum flora says. Does that kind of answer it?
Yeah, I think it kind of does. There's one particular instance that pops to mind where like I couldn't find any synonym for the thing it was being called on. I want to say like iNaturalist had a completely different name for it, even at genus level, than either the Egyptian or Calflora did. And I was like, what's going on there? And I don't know if that's anything that would be within your purview or if you're aware of stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to research things like that. I don't have a very good grasp of how iNaturalist does it. I think what they try to do is appoint an editor worldwide for a genus. So for instance, our buddy Kira Morse is that editor for Malacathamnus. He's great because he's he's really on it and he's paying attention to California. There's other people who might not be as committed or doing as much work and might not be paying attention to California stuff. In which case it's it could be kind of strange. The one case where we'll use USDA plants is if we have, let's say, an agricultural weed or something, and it's not mentioned in the Gypsum flora, but we have observations of it, then we'll use the USDA plants name.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Taxonomy questions always defer to John. Okay, well, thank you very much. Here's our email address. If you come up with questions later and you want to ask them, spprt@calflora.org, and please include a link. If you say, I'm trying to add a record for my naturalist, here's what I'm doing and it's not working, include that link. And thank you, Milo Baker, for having us. It's too bad we're not in person, but it's better virtual than not. So we appreciate it.
Thank you, Cynthia. Really appreciate it. Right. Thanks everyone for joining us. And maybe we'll see you all in a month at our next presentation, maybe in person, maybe in a hybrid, in person or both. So thanks again.